The town of Noorhaven, nestled in the heart of a vast desert, was a place unlike any other. By night, its lantern-lit streets glimmered like stars brought down to earth, while the oasis in its center shimmered with an almost ethereal glow. The air smelled of jasmine and dates, and the wind carried whispers of contentment. Yet, amidst all this beauty, lived Yusuf, a young merchant whose soul bore the weight of a storm. Yusuf had once been the pride of Noorhaven, a diligent worker and a man of faith. His shop brimmed with spices, fabrics, and trinkets, drawing customers from distant lands. But calamities like uninvited guests came one after another. First, his father, his guiding light, was taken by illness. Then a fire swept through the market, leaving his shop in ashes. His prayers, he felt, went unanswered, and slowly the warmth of Noorhaven's lights failed to reach his heart. Each night, Yusuf wandered the streets aimlessly, his shadow trailing behind like an unwanted companion. He stared at the glowing lanterns, their steady flames mocking the turmoil within him. "Why me, Allah?" he would whisper to the silent stars, his voice tinged with anger and despair. He felt abandoned, like a ship adrift in a sea of endless night. The people of Noorhaven noticed the change in Yusuf. Once a man who greeted everyone with a smile, he now walked with a bowed head and weary eyes. Children no longer ran to him for sweets, and his neighbors stopped inviting him to gatherings, afraid his sorrow would dampen their joy. He became a ghost in his own town, present but unseen. Yet, even in his despair, Yusuf's heart retained a flicker of the man he once was. He would sometimes pause by the oasis, watching its ripples dance under the moonlight. In those moments, he would feel a pang of longing, a faint yearning for the connection with Allah that had once anchored his soul. But the weight of his losses always pulled him back. His mind replayed memories of his father's smile, the bustling market stalls, and the life he had lost. If Allah is merciful, he thought, why has he allowed my life to crumble? These questions haunted him, their echoes louder than the soothing whispers of Noorhaven's wind. One evening, as Yusuf sat by the oasis, a group of travelers passed by, their lanterns casting long shadows. He overheard them speaking of their trials, but instead of despair, their voices carried hope. "With every hardship comes ease," one of them said, quoting the Quran. Yusuf clenched his fists, his heart torn between envy and curiosity. How could they hold on to hope when he could not? That night, Yusuf returned to his small, dark home. He sat in silence, staring at the empty walls, his mind replaying the traveler's words. Somewhere deep within, a question began to form. Was he the one who had distanced himself from Allah, or had Allah truly abandoned him? Unbeknownst to Yusuf, his life was about to change. A chance encounter, orchestrated by fate, would reignite the spark within him and light a path he thought had been lost forever. But for now, he remained in the dark, unaware that the answers he sought were closer than he imagined. The following evening, Yusuf wandered to the edge of Noorhaven, where the lanterns gave way to shadows and the air grew still. He sat by the outer gates, his head resting on his knees, when a faint sound reached his ears. It was the groan of a cart's wheels struggling against the uneven ground. Yusuf lifted his head and saw an elderly woman, her small frame bent under the weight of a heavy sack. The sight tugged at something deep within him. Though he was consumed by his own pain, he couldn't ignore her struggle. Slowly, he rose to his feet and approached her. "Mother," he said gently, "allow me to carry that for you." The woman looked up, her face weathered but kind, and her lips curved into a soft smile. "May Allah bless you, my son," she said, handing him the sack with a sigh of relief. As they walked together, the woman began to speak. Her voice, though frail, carried a strength Yusuf hadn't heard in years. She told him about her life, a life riddled with losses greater than he could fathom. Her husband and sons had been taken in a war that left her village in ruins, yet she had found solace in Allah's plan. "Pain, my son," she said, "is a bridge to the Almighty. Cross it with patience, and you will find ease on the other side." Yusuf listened in silence, her words stirring something within him. How could she, who had suffered so much, speak with such unwavering faith? It was as if her heart carried a light that no darkness could extinguish. He envied her resilience, but also felt a faint glimmer of hope. Perhaps, he thought, there was more to his pain than he could understand. When they reached her modest home, the woman invited Yusuf inside. The walls were bare and the furniture sparse, but there was a warmth that filled the air. She poured him a cup of tea and handed him a small, hand-carved lantern. "Take this," she said, her eyes shining with wisdom. "This light will guide you when you think all is lost. And remember, Allah's mercy is vast, even when we cannot see it." Yusuf accepted the lantern, his fingers tracing the intricate carvings. It felt strangely familiar, as if it had been made just for him. He thanked the woman and promised to return the next day to repay her kindness. As he left her home, the faintest smile touched his lips. For the first time in years, he felt a flicker of something other than despair. That night, as Yusuf sat in his small home, he lit the lantern. Its warm glow filled the room, chasing away the shadows that had become his constant companions. Inside the lantern, he discovered a folded piece of parchment. His heart quickened as he unfolded it and read the words written upon it. "And whoever fears Allah, He will make for him a way out and provide for him from where he does not expect." The verse struck him like a bolt of lightning, illuminating the darkness within his soul. Yusuf clutched the lantern to his chest, tears streaming down his face. For the first time in years, he felt the presence of Allah, not as a distant figure, but as a guiding light. And in that moment, he realized that his journey was far from over. It had only just begun. The verse from the parchment lingered in Yusuf's mind like a melody he couldn't forget. It replayed over and over, illuminating the darkest corners of his soul. For the first time in years, his despair felt less like a burden and more like an opportunity to seek something greater. He placed the lantern by his bedside, its glow steady and reassuring, and fell into the first peaceful sleep he had known in months. The next morning, as the call to prayer echoed across Noor Haven, Yusuf awoke with a sense of purpose he couldn't quite explain. He washed himself, donned his cleanest clothes, and headed to the masjid, his heart heavy yet eager. The sight of the masjid's golden dome against the morning sky filled him with a quiet awe. It reminded him of a simpler time when he had prayed not out of routine, but out of love for Allah. As Yusuf stood in prayer, his forehead touching the cool mat, his tears flowed freely. "Ya Allah," he whispered, his voice trembling, "I have strayed far from you, but I seek your mercy. Guide me back to the path of light." Each word felt like a step closer to healing, like a weight lifting from his chest. For the first time, he didn't feel alone. He felt heard. After the prayer, an old imam approached Yusuf with a gentle smile. "My son," he said, placing a hand on Yusuf's shoulder, "it brings me joy to see you here today. You carry a heaviness, but remember, Allah's mercy is greater than any burden." The imam's words struck a chord, as if they were another sign meant to pull Yusuf closer to the light. Encouraged, Yusuf decided to take small steps to rebuild his life. He returned to the ruins of his shop, determined to see if anything could be salvaged. Among the ashes, he found a single unburned spice jar, its aroma rich and familiar. He held it to his chest, tears stinging his eyes, and whispered, "Perhaps this is a beginning." Neighbors passing by noticed Yusuf sifting through the rubble. One by one, they stopped to offer help. An old friend offered him a corner of his shop to restart his trade. A carpenter volunteered to build shelves for free. Even children, who once avoided him, brought flowers to decorate his new space. The kindness of Norhaven's people felt like a balm to Yusuf's wounded heart. Each day, Yusuf worked tirelessly to rebuild his shop, but he also began to rebuild something far greater, his connection with Allah. He started each morning with Fajr, recited verses from the Quran, and ended his days in gratitude. The lantern the old woman had given him became a symbol of his journey, its light a constant reminder of the verse that had reignited his faith. Slowly but surely, Yusuf's shop began to thrive again. Customers returned, drawn not only by his goods, but by the warmth in his demeanor. He greeted everyone with a smile, his eyes reflecting a peace that had once seemed impossible. His transformation didn't go unnoticed, and soon people began to seek his advice, inspired by the light he carried within. Despite the progress, Yusuf knew his journey wasn't over. The memory of the old woman who had given him the lantern lingered in his mind. He decided to visit her once more, to thank her for the gift that had changed his life. Little did he know, another revelation awaited him. The soft amber glow of the lantern guided Yusuf through the dimly lit streets of Norhaven as he approached the outskirts of the town. The narrow alleys he traversed seemed unfamiliar this time, darker and quieter than he remembered. The comforting hum of life in the marketplace faded into an eerie stillness. Yusuf clutched the lantern closer, its intricate carvings warm against his palm, as though it held answers he hadn't yet understood. The house stood at the end of a gravel path, its silhouette framed by the faint light of a crescent moon. Unlike the lively warmth he had seen before, the house now appeared cold and desolate. Its wooden shutters hung crookedly, creaking softly with the wind, and vines had begun to claim its walls. A single lantern once lit by the old woman now hung extinguished by the door, swaying faintly as if mourning the absence of its keeper. Yusuf hesitated, his breath shallow as a sense of unease began to creep into his heart. He knocked on the door, the sound echoing hollowly. "Mother Amina," he called, his voice trembling slightly. The stillness that followed was deafening, pressing down on him like a heavy weight. He pushed the door open cautiously, peering into the dimly lit interior. The once inviting space he remembered was now cloaked in shadows. Dust covered the surfaces, and the faint scent of jasmine that had once filled the air was replaced by a musty stillness. Yusuf stepped inside, the lantern in his hand casting flickering patterns on the walls. "Mother Amina," he called again, louder this time. But the house remained silent, its emptiness almost palpable. As he stepped further in, Yusuf's eyes fell upon a small wooden chest tucked into the corner of the room. Its lid was slightly ajar, revealing faded parchment and a few trinkets. Kneeling beside it, he carefully lifted one of the papers. It was a handwritten note, its ink smudged by time. The words, though faded, struck him deeply. "Faith is the light that guides us through the darkest storms. Trust in him, for he never abandons his servants." Yusuf's hands trembled as he read the words, his mind racing with questions. How could this house, so full of life and wisdom when he had visited weeks ago, now feel like a relic of the past? Who had Mother Amina truly been? He felt an overwhelming need to seek answers, to understand the strange connection between the old woman's presence and the light that had returned to his soul. As he stepped outside, a passerby noticed him lingering by the door. The man, a shepherd with kind eyes, stopped and asked, "Are you looking for someone, brother?" Yusuf nodded, describing the old woman, her warmth, her wisdom, and the lantern she had given him. The shepherd's expression shifted from curiosity to surprise. "That house has been abandoned for years," he said softly. "The woman you speak of, Mother Amina, passed away a decade ago. She was loved by many, known for her prayers and her guidance, but she's long gone." Yusuf's heart raced. "No, that can't be," he insisted, holding up the lantern. "She gave me this just weeks ago. She spoke to me, guided me when I was lost." The shepherd's eyes lingered on the lantern, its steady glow reflecting in his gaze. "Perhaps," he said after a pause, "her prayers continue to guide even now. Allah works in ways we cannot always understand." Yusuf staggered back, his mind reeling. How could someone long gone have appeared so vividly in his life, offering words and actions that had transformed his path? The lantern in his hand felt heavier now, as though it carried a secret he was yet to fully grasp. He looked at the shepherd, desperate for more answers, but the man simply bowed his head and walked away, leaving Yusuf alone with his thoughts. Determined to uncover the truth, Yusuf decided to visit the graveyard where the townsfolk said Mother Amina was buried. The path to the graveyard was lined with ancient trees, their gnarled branches casting long shadows in the moonlight. Each step felt like a journey into the unknown, his heart heavy with a mix of awe and unease. When Yusuf reached the graveyard, the stillness of the night seemed to deepen. Rows of simple gravestones stood in silence, their inscriptions faintly illuminated by his lantern's glow. He walked among them, his eyes scanning each name until he found it. Amina bint Rashid. Her grave was marked with a modest stone, surrounded by wildflowers that seemed to thrive despite the arid desert climate. Kneeling beside the grave, Yusuf placed the lantern gently on the ground. His hands shook as he traced the name carved into the stone. "Mother Amina," he whispered, his voice breaking. "Was it truly you who saved me? Were you sent to guide me when I had lost my way?" The air around him felt alive, as though her presence lingered even now, unseen but deeply felt. Tears streamed down Yusuf's face as he prayed for her soul, his words a mixture of gratitude and awe. "Ya Allah," he said, his voice trembling. "I don't understand your wisdom, but I am grateful. You sent me light when I was drowning in darkness. You guided me through one of your beloved servants. Thank you for your mercy." As Yusuf rose to leave, he noticed that the lantern's glow had grown brighter, its light steady and unwavering. It seemed to mirror the warmth now blooming in his heart, a reflection of the peace he had found. The journey back to Norhaven felt different, lighter, as though the burden of his despair had been lifted entirely. The night air, once oppressive, now felt cool and refreshing, carrying the scent of wildflowers and jasmine. When Yusuf returned to his shop, he placed the lantern on the highest shelf, its light a beacon visible to anyone who entered. It became a symbol of hope, not just for him, but for the entire community. Those who heard his story came to see the lantern, drawn by the tale of Mother Amina and the light that had guided him back to faith. Over time, Yusuf came to realize that Mother Amina's presence in his life had been no coincidence. Whether she had appeared as a vision, a miracle, or simply through the lingering power of her prayers, her guidance had been a divine intervention. The lantern she had given him wasn't just a physical object. It was a testament to Allah's mercy and the unseen ways in which He answers prayers. For the rest of his life, Yusuf carried her lessons with him, sharing her story with anyone who felt lost. "Even in our darkest moments," he would say, "Allah's light is near. We only need to open our hearts to see it." The story of Yusuf's transformation spread like wildfire across Norhaven, a tale that captured the hearts of its people. His shop, once a quiet corner of the marketplace, had become a haven for those seeking not just goods, but comfort and wisdom. The lantern, prominently displayed on a high shelf, cast its gentle glow across the room, its light as steady as Yusuf's newfound faith. Each person who entered felt a warmth that seemed to emanate not just from the lantern, but from Yusuf himself, whose smile now reflected the peace he had found within. Every morning, Yusuf began his day with prayer. Before the first light of dawn broke over the desert, he would stand in solitude, the lantern illuminating the Quran before him. The verses he recited filled the room with a sense of serenity, their meaning sinking deeper into his heart with each repetition. "Ya Allah," he would whisper, his voice carrying the gratitude he felt. "Guide me to be a source of light for others, as you have been for me." These prayers became the foundation of his day, anchoring him in faith and purpose. One day, a weary traveler entered Yusuf's shop. His clothes were tattered, and his face was etched with lines of fatigue. The man looked around hesitantly, as though unsure of what he was seeking. Yusuf greeted him warmly and offered him a seat. "What brings you to Norhaven, brother?" he asked. The traveler sighed deeply before replying, "I've been wandering for months, searching for peace, but all I've found is hardship. I've prayed for relief, but it feels as though my prayers are unheard." Yusuf listened intently, nodding as the man spoke. When the traveler finished, Yusuf gestured toward the lantern on the shelf. "Do you see this light?" he asked. The man nodded, his gaze fixed on the steady flame. "This lantern was given to me when I was at my lowest," Yusuf continued. "It reminded me of a verse from the Quran. And whoever fears Allah, He will make for him a way out and provide for him from where he does not expect. Trust in Allah, even when the answers seem distant. He is closer to us than we realize." The traveler's eyes welled with tears, and for the first time in months, he smiled. "Thank you," he said softly, "for reminding me." As the days turned into weeks, Yusuf's shop became more than just a business. It became a sanctuary. People came not only to purchase spices or fabrics, but to share their burdens, seeking the wisdom and comfort Yusuf offered so freely. He would listen patiently, his own experiences allowing him to empathize deeply. Each conversation was a chance to share the lessons he had learned, to remind others of Allah's mercy and the strength that could be found in faith. One evening, as the sun cast its final golden rays over Norhaven, Yusuf closed his shop early and carried the lantern to the oasis. A small gathering of villagers awaited him, their faces lit with anticipation. Children sat cross-legged at his feet, their eyes wide with curiosity as he began to speak. "Do you know why lanterns are so special?" Yusuf asked, holding up the glowing light. "They don't banish the darkness all at once. They illuminate just enough for us to take the next step. That's how Allah's guidance works. He shows us the way, one step at a time." An elderly woman in the crowd raised her hand, her voice trembling as she asked, "Yusuf, how did you find your way back when everything seemed lost?" Yusuf smiled gently, his gaze distant as he recalled his darkest days. "I thought I had been abandoned," he said, "but Allah never left me. He sent me a sign, a guide, when I needed it most." Mother Amina's words reminded me of Allah's mercy, and her lantern became a symbol of His guidance. It wasn't my strength that brought me back, it was His mercy. The villagers listened in rapt silence, their hearts moved by Yusuf's honesty. His words resonated deeply, reminding them that their own struggles were not without purpose. One by one they began to share their stories, tales of hardship and hope, of prayers answered in ways they hadn't expected. The oasis became a place of connection, a space where faith and community intertwined. Over time, Yusuf's story became a legend in Norhaven. Children grew up hearing about the merchant who had lost everything but found his way back through faith. The lantern, always glowing brightly in his shop, became a symbol of resilience and trust in Allah. People from neighboring towns traveled to Noorhaven to hear Yusuf speak, seeking the light he carried within him. His words, simple yet profound, reminded them that even in the darkest moments, Allah's guidance was near. One evening, as Yusuf was closing his shop, a young boy appeared at the door. His clothes were dusty, and his eyes were wide with desperation. Clutched in his small hands was a bundle of dates, their leaves wilted. "Please, sir," the boy said, his voice trembling. "My family is hungry, but we have no money. Will you take these in exchange for food?" Yusuf knelt before the boy, his heart aching at the sight. Without hesitation, he placed a loaf of bread and a small sack of rice into the boy's hands. "You don't need to trade anything," he said gently. "Take this, and remember that Allah provides for those in need." The boy's eyes filled with tears as he whispered his thanks and ran off into the night. Yusuf watched him go, his chest swelling with a mixture of sadness and gratitude. Turning back to the lantern, he whispered a silent prayer. "Ya Allah, let this light be a reminder of your mercy, for me and for all who see it. Let it guide those who feel lost, as you have guided me." For years, Yusuf continued to serve his community, his shop a beacon of hope for all who entered. The lantern remained on its high shelf, its glow steady and unwavering. It became a symbol not just of Yusuf's personal journey, but of the collective spirit of Noorhaven, a reminder that faith, kindness, and trust in Allah could illuminate even the darkest paths. Long after Yusuf's time, his story lived on, passed down through generations as a testament to the infinite mercy and wisdom of Allah. Even as the sands of time shifted, the light of Yusuf's lantern never faded, its glow a constant presence in the hearts of those who heard his story. It was a reminder that with faith and patience, even the smallest flame could dispel the deepest darkness. In Noorhaven, the legend of Yusuf and the lantern became more than a tale. It became a guiding light for all who sought the way back to Allah. As the story of Yusuf and the lantern draws to a close, we are reminded of a profound truth. No matter how dark life may seem, Allah's guidance is always near. Yusuf's journey from despair to faith teaches us that trials are not meant to break us, but to bring us closer to our Creator. His story reflects the resilience of the human spirit when anchored in trust, patience, and reliance on Allah's mercy. The lantern, a simple object, became a powerful symbol of light, hope, and divine guidance. It illuminated not only Yusuf's path, but also the hearts of everyone who crossed his path. Like the lantern, we too have the potential to be sources of light for others, spreading kindness and faith in even the most challenging times. Remember, Allah's mercy is vast, and His wisdom surpasses our understanding. As He promises in the Quran, "Indeed, with hardship comes ease." Surah Ash-Shah 6. Even when the answers to our prayers feel distant, Allah is preparing a way for us, just as He did for Yusuf. Take a moment to reflect on your own life. What lanterns of guidance has Allah placed in your path? Who has He sent to remind you of His mercy? Perhaps your role is to be a lantern for someone else, to inspire hope and faith in those who need it most. Let Yusuf's story serve as a beacon, reminding us that with trust in Allah, even the darkest nights can lead to the brightest dawns. May we all find the strength to hold on to His light, no matter how long or difficult the journey. Thank you for watching this story from Wisdom of Deen. If it touched your heart, please share it with others who may need this reminder. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more inspiring stories rooted in faith and wisdom. Until next time, may Allah's guidance and mercy be with you always.